question. Dawn Esser, no power plant. Okay. Now, AES has been using a lot of scare tactics, and it's been discussed at council meetings, and council members have reiterated it, that AES will simply leave the existing structure up there as a blighted, existing, they'll just stop operations and just leave that structure there. What is they're inhibiting them to be able to do that type of blight to our community?
If they do that, they're going to reduce their, well, first, as we stated earlier, if they're at that point, if power generation is a non-conforming use on the property,
May I get the mic a little closer?
then they run the risk of forfeiting their non-conforming use because they haven't used it. Frank was saying that it could be as, I think it's 18 months before you forfeit a non-conforming use when you snooze on it. The other risk that they run is, that the property's value is going to depreciate because now you've lost the ability to generate power on the property, and you don't have the right to do so in the future because it's been zoned differently. And so now the property has become less expensive, and now if you want to talk about a real taking, the city could actually condemn the property, take it, seize it by eminent domain, and pay them adequate compensation as they're required under the state and the federal constitution. And the cost of doing so would be much less, since it's a blighted industrial property with no ability to generate power on that property. So if you ask me, that's a great thing for them to do because it makes the cost of acquiring the property much less, and then the city can acquire it and generate the revenue from whether it's a ground lease that they engage in developing a park, the commercial uses, taxes, you name it.
Yeah, the president of AES actually said that.
Right.
Has made that threat. Oh, we'll just keep the existing structures, and it's just, and all it is a scare tactic.
I think in addition to what Jane was saying, there's a general concept of nuisance law that any city or any regulatory agency can impose on people to require them to maintain a property in a way that conforms with the community and basically it's not an eyesore. So if AES decides basically to shut down the power plant and not continue to operate it anymore, and like Zane said, if it continues for 18 months or longer or whatever, even if it doesn't continue for that long, a city has the authority to go in and says, hey, this is now becoming an eyesore for our community. This is what we need to do, X, Y, and Z. You probably have seen it or heard about it on the news about foreclosure homes, and it goes to banks. Basically, if a bank has a bunch of houses on a block, and these houses are deteriorating, and nobody's mowing the grass, and the property is deteriorating, the city can go in and either fix up the house themselves and send the bill to the bank, or require the bank to basically take action to at least maintain the property, so at least it's not an eyesore, it's not lowering the value of the other properties in the surrounding area.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing. Actually, the initiative has a provision that 2 years after the power generation has to be discontinued and phased out, as it now exists, based on the initiative and based on the State Water Resources Board rule. 2 years later, also, it requires AES to remove the current plant and remediate the property, and that's by December 31, 2022. So exactly 2 years after the December 31 deadline to discontinue power generation. However, and that's a big however, remember, this initiative, nothing in it expropriates 1 acre of the 50 acres. AES continues to own its property, continues to enjoy the fundamental attributes of ownership, to sell the property to whom it wants, and to develop the property under the new zoning. As we said before, no one has a right to the specific zoning. Everyone knows that every city council, it's not necessarily the voters, city councils, counties can change the zoning. AES has very significant rights as a property owner once the zoning, and perhaps rights that give them perhaps a bigger return, we don't know, on their investment, significant commercial development rights. And what I was getting to is about this building is that the initiative also allows them to reuse or repurpose at least a significant portion of the building,
Up to 30%.
and specifically 30%, right? So as Jim and others developed the zoning provisions of the initiative, as you remember, they took a lot of public input, and a number of residents at the time wanted to keep the Wailing Wall, and others wanted to keep the older part of the plant because it's Art Deco, it's structure, and others did not. And so the initiative therefore struck that compromise of allowing reuse of up to 30% of the current plant building if a majority of the voters vote for that specific reuse. And if that's not the case, then by December 31, 2012, the building has to go. And if it doesn't go, then of course the city has the right to enforce, basically to go into enforcement. Because if you, as Amy
He
said,
said 2012, it's 2022.
2022, excuse me. Because once something becomes a complete violation of the zoning code, then the city has the discretion to proceed and apply its nuisance laws or the state nuisance laws. And again, existing zoning regulations of the city of Redondo Beach already say that if the use doesn't comply, or a structure doesn't comply anymore with the zoning code, and the use therein has become non-conforming, which it becomes after December 31, 2020, then the city can apply, enforce its nuisance, state nuisance law, and demolish the building.
So I'm going to give a little bit of a non-legal
Jim,
spin
we
on
have a
this.
question here first.
Yeah, I'm just going to do a quick non-legal spin on this. Not spin, but in my view, there's shareholders that own AES, and their responsibilities to their shareholders. So once they can't do power at that site, for them to just abandon it in place and have to pay taxes on it, there's also environmental things they have to do, there's wells that they have to pay to test. That's a money loss to their shareholders. So I think their board of directors would pretty quickly say, you've got to do something to make money on that property. The second thing is the fact that they've got multiple other power projects throughout California. I think the last thing they want to do is show the CEC that they're playing bitter with a town that they just abandoned a power plant at. And then the third thing is, if they ever want to do anything with that property that involves development, they're going to have to go through our city to get it done. And to sit there and throw it in our face and let the thing be blighted and then come back and ask for some kind of development is not in their best interest. So we are hopeful that once this passes, we can come to the table with AES and move pretty quickly towards a solution.